Easter Sunday. If you are listening on Sunday morning, happy Easter to you. I hope that you are able to make it to church somewhere today to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ with some other people doing that. It's great to do that together, to worship together, to celebrate together. That's something we are called to do as believers. And maybe you've already done that this morning. Some of you went to a early morning sunrise service. Maybe this is your first time ever listening to this program because you went to that early morning sunrise service and now you're at home listening to the radio going, what goes on this station while I'm at church? Well, this goes on. We're glad that you're here as a part of our show today. Hey, you know what? Perhaps though this show is your Easter, and I realize that for some people this radio program might be your Easter service, and if that's true, then hey, I'm glad to have Easter with you. Welcome to Cultivating Ethos. And I hope that you can come over for some ham after the show, so you're invited. Well, what about doubts? People say, how can I be certain? I just have so many doubts. The thing is about doubt is that doubt is not the absence of belief. You can be a believer and have doubt. Doubt is the presence, though, of some uncertainty. But, here's the thing. If you are a believer versus a non-believer, that doubt plays itself out differently. For the faithful, you take that uncertainty, that doubt you have, and you suppose, because you have faith, that it can be resolved. So you look into the scriptures, you pray, you ask questions, and you seek the Lord in the midst of your doubts, and the Lord will grow you, and that's how you become a stronger follower of Jesus. You say, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief, as the man said to Jesus in the New Testament. That becomes your attitude. That's what you do with doubt. So don't feel bad if you're a believer, if you have some doubts, or if you're struggling with certainty. Everybody does. For the faithful, you take that, you know it can be resolved by Christ, and you take it to Him. Now, if you're listening and you're a non-believer, or for the non-believers you assume that the uncertainty you have must prove that you should not have faith in Jesus, so you look to find certainty elsewhere. It's kind of an interesting thing that we do. Well, I have doubts, so therefore I don't believe it. But you got to believe something. You might say, well, there is no God. Well, how can you believe that with certainty? You really can't. And the thing is about certainty, when we try to get that with anything, is it gets pretty depressing when you realize that there is very little that we can be certain about. Death and taxes, that's what somebody had to say, right? Those two things, they're coming due. What can you be truly certain about? Are you certain that your spouse loves you if you're married? Are you certain, absolutely certain, that she isn't poisoning your coffee a little each day? Some of you are genuinely suspicious about that. I hope you get some counseling. But really, how can you be certain about anything? There is an element of doubt to most things. And what do we think about people who claim to be God anyway? You know what? We think they are crazy, and we should think that. Unless they say that they're God, and then they die publicly, get buried, come up out of the grave a couple days later, show themselves to hundreds of people at the same time, and then launch a movement with a bunch of unimpressive people that becomes the greatest, most important movement in all of human history. You see, that one guy who claims to be God, Jesus, he came out of the tomb. I think he's worth listening to. And I think he's worth following. You know why? Because I'd like to follow a guy out of the grave. I know I'm going to the grave one day. I'd love to follow him out of the grave into eternal life as he promised. And I'm sure that you would too. That's the promise from Jesus. See, and actually when you have doubts, you can investigate. And as it turns out, the evidence that Jesus did rise from the grave is very compelling historically. Well, in our Easter message today, we're going to talk about that more. Wherever you are in your faith journey, I think today will be informative and inspiring to you. Yes, you might have doubts, and we're going to try to shrink them as much as possible and bring you closer to the certainty that we can have in Jesus Christ. But I want you to investigate the scriptures, and if you've got doubts, if you've got troubles in these areas, do not be afraid to ask questions or to investigate. I, as a person who teaches the gospel every single week, have full confidence that I have nothing to fear when somebody asks me questions about it. In fact, if you've got questions, ask them. Go to our Facebook page, Cultivating Ethos. Just search for Cultivating Ethos, click like, ask your question. You can do it on the wall or send us a direct message. You can do the same thing on Instagram or Twitter, or you can just email me, info@cultivatingethos.org. That's cultivatingethos.org. We are here because we believe that through Jesus Christ and following Him, your world gets better, and you will be used by Him to make the world better of everybody else in your relational world. This is Cultivating Ethos.